Well, let's talk about Daniel Jones, right? So Daniel Jones is another one where the Giants don't pick up his fifth-year option because he didn't play well enough the first. And also, and this is interesting. I don't think people necessarily understand this as much, but like the top 10 picks have a different fifth-year option number than I believe 11 through 32, and that changed since the original. So like the CBA is qualitatively the same, but like they did start making the fifth-year option more expensive for top picks. And so Jones is a sixth overall pick. There's a little bit of an issue there as well. Like it's expensive. That's no longer cheap. But he comes in year 4, and with Brian Dable at the helm, with no wide receivers. You look at like there Isaiah Hodgson's. Like I'm a junkie, and I didn't know who that dude was. Right when Richie James was a journeyman. Kenny Galladay is a guy they gave big money to. Can't play anymore. Like they don't want him on the field. Tight ends, a bunch of young guys. They got rid of Evan Ingram, who was a first-round pick, and he performs really well. Like he goes on the road in the playoffs, beats a 13-win Vikings team. It ended in Philadelphia, but we saw Philadelphia as a great team. And now he wants $45 million per year. And you're like, what are we doing here? Like I feel like this would be the perfect example of a quarterback kind of taking $30 million a year, right? Like at $30 million a year, I think Daniel Jones and Brian Dable could provide a surplus. At $45 million, you don't give yourself much of a chance, do you?
You don't give yourself much of a chance. I'm putting myself in that scenario with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, and I guarantee behind closed doors, they're batting their heads against the wall saying, is this really where we are going? Are we really going to pay 45? We love him. We love what he did. He stood up and did what he needed to do. He ran like he needed. I mean, he put himself on the line, right? So he did all the things as an organization you want to do. At 25 to 30 million, when you start talking $45 million, you're talking. I know we're going to talk a little bit about elasticity of quarterback contracts. My God. Now, okay, step back for a second. You have a new general manager and first year general manager going in their second year and second year head coach. They weren't responsible for drafting him, right? So there's a little bit less pressure. If this sounds odd, but if you're the guy that made the pick or the guys that made the pick, and it's been up and down, and you get to this spot now, you have been affected in so many other ways, right? Because you've seen the ups and downs. They've only seen this. It's a lot easier for them to go to John Mara and say, John, we are seriously thinking about, let's sign this guy. Let's get him signed, because that's all they've seen. They haven't seen that or really felt the downside of it, like the other regime, of course.
Well, when you say elasticity of quarterback contracts, like I think that, this is where it gets tough, because I think of what if Daniel Jones were to hit the open market, because we do have a few examples. Now, Blake Bortles is really the only top 10 pick that ever signed for something in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. And your agent's not going to come back to you and be like, hey, I got you the Bortles contract. That's really the hard part of this entire thing, right? So I get what they're doing, but it's risky, because I remember in 2019, Jameis Winston led, and I won a lot of money because I bet this, and I wrote it in Peter King's column. Jameis Winston led the league in passing yards in 2019. Now, he also threw 30 interceptions, but those are just details. He threw for more than 8 yards an attempt. Jameis Winston was a more accomplished quarterback than Daniel Jones was, right? And a very talented guy. And when he went to the open market, it didn't go from top of the market to halfway. That thing went all the way to like 1.5 to 5 million. That was, I can't remember exactly what he signed for with the Saints, but he went when he didn't get over that cliff of starter money, he got all the way to backup money, right? And so if Daniel Jones wants to play musical chairs, right, and Derek Carr goes somewhere, and Aaron Rodgers goes somewhere, and Marcus Mariota goes somewhere, and Tyrod Taylor go, and they all coalesce, and this thing's not working out for him, he could lose all that. That's the game. And like when I say elasticity of quarterback contracts, it doesn't move gradually with how good you are. It's you make nothing or backup money Chad Henne money,
Mm-hmm.
or you make the 45 million. And so I understand them going to the 45, but I'd like to see a quarterback of Daniel Jones's ilk lay up for 30, right? And just understand your market, because and your guy in New England understood this the most. If you win, the money will come. And I feel like if Daniel Jones makes $45 million, they will not win. It's just mathematical to me.
I get that. Now we're going to factor this in. You guys get sick and tired of me coming back to it. When those guys are out in the market and they don't get what they think they're going to get, I mean, there is no question in my mind. You start digging into some of the other stuff, the leadership element, the true leadership. I'm not saying the midline. When you're going to pay $45 million a year for someone, you better have top notch in everything. I understand there are some limitations, but like, you have to be convinced that Daniel Jones is the one that's going to lead you to the promised land. I mean, as a true leader, as an intellect, which we know he's smart, but the leadership side. When you talk about Jameis Winston and falling, and there is no way, if you are a very good quarterback in the league and you have questionable true leadership ability and understanding of the game or whatever it may be, and I'm not just saying him, this has happened for many quarterbacks over the years, all of a sudden your bottom drops out, because whether we like to hear it or not, there is a lot of talking about things like that, right? It comes from the organization. Unfortunately, the agents lose their mind over it, right? Because the agent has a jaded perspective of their employee, of their client, excuse me. So anyway, there are interesting, again, back to nuances of why some of these guys drop and why the other ones, will hold their value on it. But I agree with you, that elasticity, like, okay, if you don't pay him that, what's going to be what's the quarterback number this year, by the way?
45 million.
It's straight up 45. But if you're talking, I for some reason thought it was a little bit lower. You were saying 45, but if he were to sign a contract.
Well, the thing that the teams do, like, so the 45 always is the APY, right? Like, that's the starting point. And then essentially it depends upon where the team is cap wise, right? So Garoppolo's deal with San Fran in 2018 front loaded a lot of stuff, and they paid it out right away. And in fact, it was genius because he got hurt early and they took their lumps. And then when they got good, he was cheaper as a function of the cap. And then there are other times where they'll backload it. So it'll be 45 APY, but effectively, and that's part of the negotiation, right? So if you tag him, he's on the cap for 45 million. And essentially what ends up happening is you sign him to a long-term deal, and maybe that cap hit in year one is like 25, right? That's the benefit to a team, is like the team comes to the table and uses those extra years to smooth it out and give the player security while giving the team cap relief.